Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry I was postponed on doing my meta review. Usually do them on Mondays. So we're going to hop right into it. So we're going to talk about the top 8 performing archetypes in Diamond and above for the last week of Magic the Gathering. So just the tail end of the August season and the beginning of the September season. And we're going to use a third-party tracker called Untapped. So it will be purely informational, but I will try to give you as much information as I possibly can in hopes that will help you climb to Mythic and make you a better Magic the Gathering player. And then we'll also talk about the tournament scene. So in the tournament scene in Best of 3, we had a tournament in, was it Chicago? Nope, Orlando. I'm totally on top of it. Anyway, so we had a big tournament that we get to talk about this weekend in Best of 3, and it's not all Izzet Cauldron, which is kind of exciting. So anyway, let's dive in. So number 1, according to Untapped, in Tier 1 was Boros Burn. This was over 5,700 matches, so a pretty decent sample size. If we compare this one to Week 4 of Edge of Eternities, we can see no changes to the most popular and most top-performing list. And the archetype is favored against Jeskai Artifacts. It's a favored coin flip, which means somewhere between 50 and 55% against mono red aggro and Izzet prowess, and it's weak, which means below 45% against mono white life gain. Its opening hand, you're looking for the Sheltered by Ghosts if your version is running that. Hired Claw, the Screaming Nemesis, and the Slick Shot Show Off. Number 2, according to Untapped, and in Tier 2, which means it's a standard deviation below Boros Burn. So Boros Burn is looking like the archetype that has won out for Edge of Eternities. This one was played at 14,000 matches, so this one is more popular than Boros Burn. This is not done by popularity, this is just done by win rate in Diamond and above. So if we look at this one and we compare it to Week 4, we also see no changes. Usually by week 3, we kind of have the archetypes figured out. Week 4 and Week 5, sometimes we see some small changes, right? It's not too uncommon, right? And some people like to do the smaller sample sizes and see how things are like tweaking around every single week. And then sometimes you get some weird stuff that then is like, oh, well, that's not quite right. So I tend to prefer a larger sample size with the downside that it doesn't change every week, right? And I actually think that's nice because it doesn't encourage needless spinning of wild cards, right? So, it's nice that there's like sort of an established norm for the archetype. And the other thing too is that it's nice to know these archetypes for what your opponent is going to play, right? Like a good chunk of the ladder are people playing net decks, and you can anticipate their plays. So anyway, there's no changes to this one. It's favored against Izzet Prowess and mono green landfall, which means it's above 55% win rate. It's a coin flip against Jeskai Artifacts and mono black demons, meaning it's 49, 50%, or 51%. And then it is weak against mono white life gain. Its opening hand, you're looking for the Hired Claw. Some versions are running the Razorkin Needlehead. If you are running that version, then that is good to have in your opening hand as well. Screaming Nemesis and the Emberheart Challenger. If you don't know what the Razorkin Needlehead is, we'll talk about it when we cover Best of 3. Number 3, also in Tier 2, is Selesnya Rabbits with 880 matches. So it's the lowest amount of matches of the decks covered so far. If we compare this one, we have to go back to Week 1, which was the last time that we saw Selesnya Rabbits in the top 8, and there's no changes to this list. The data, though, was too low for talking about the matchups. If you're really interested in the matchups, it tends to punish single point interaction like mono black, because it's a general go wide strategy. And then we've got something like the Shelter by Ghosts helps out against the mono red aggro, and I've talked about this a lot throughout the weeks. So the opening hand, you're looking for the Valley Might Caller and the Pop Patch Recruit. Those stand a kind of a tier above the rest. Valley Quest Caller is a pretty decent one to have, as well as the Sheltered by Ghosts. And as well as Phineas, since Sheltered by Ghosts is only a 2 of in that list, right? Try to give you like 16 cards to kind of look for in case you're new to Magic the Gathering. So fourth place, also in tier 2, is Gruul Landfall with 9,600 matches, and it, compared to week 4, we see it go back to the version that's running the Terramorphic Expanse and dropping 2 Evolving Wilds. They are functionally the same card, not a functional change to the deck. It is favored against Izzet Prowess. So what you'll notice is that you have a so like the best. Sorry, the number 1 deck was favored against Jeskai Artifacts, right? Boros Burn. Mono red is favored against Izzet Prowess and mono green Landfall. So you have enough of a spread of like what is making up the composition of the meta that you're not really singling out a single target, right? And we saw this before rotation where it was like, well, this is good. These decks are all favored against the same deck, which was Izzet Prowess, because that was the one that was the most popular on the ladder. So actually, we're seeing pretty good diversity in best of 1. It's favored against Izzet Prowess. It's a coin flip against Jeskai Artifacts and Mono Black Demons, meaning very close to 50%. It's an unfavored coin flip, somewhere between 50% and 45% against Mono Green Landfall and Mono Red Aggro, and it is weak against Mono White Life Gain. The opening hand, you're looking for the Land War Elves, the Bristly Bill, the Spine Sower, and Mossborn Hydra, and Saw's Chocobo. Number 5 is Jeskai Artifacts, and it's also in tier 2 and has 4,600 matches. Compared to week 4, we can see it kind of reverted back to the list that's running the planets. And so we dropped 3 islands, 1 Enigma Jewel, and the 4 Authority of the Consuls, bringing in the Fabled Passage, the 3 Braided Nets, which you can use to go then craft the Fire Crystal with your Repurposing Bay. We've got the 2 Uthros, Titanic God Core for some like late game advantage off of the lands, a single plains, as well as the second copy of Adagia Windswept Bastion. Probably massacred that name. So this is the list that I think Dr. Ruckus played back in like week 1. It's doing the trick, right? So it's favored against mono white life gain. If you're bumping into a lot of mono white life gain, then the Jeskai Artifacts is going to perform better. I've talked about it, the distribution of the deck, or the archetypes throughout the ranks. From what I've seen, mono white life gain is more popular in the lower ranks and then becomes less popular in the higher ranks. However, we're starting to see less of that now. We're starting to see a little bit more of the mono white life gain sneak up into Diamond and Mythic, just according to the tracker. And again, MTG Joe does a pretty good list of like showing what is being played in Diamond and Mythic according to a popularity. So it's favored against mono white life gain. It's a coin flip against Izzet Prowess and mono red aggro. It's weak against Boros Burn and Azorius Control. So part of Jeskai Artifacts being kind of the go-to deck at the beginning is partly why we see Boros Burn at the top of the list. So the opening hand, you're looking for the Authority of Consuls if you're running it, and that's one of the pros to the list that we covered last week, is that that helps you against the tough matchup of Boros Burn if you're running the version with the Authority of the Consuls. So if you're interested in that one, go back to last week's video. You're also looking for the United Battlefront, the Clayfired Bricks, and the Simulacron Synthesizer. And then another note too, if you look at the lower ranks, Jeskai Artifacts is much higher up, and there's several decks that are in tier 1, depending on if you're looking at what range, right? So like when, for example, when a deck is not in the top 8, they'll be like, well, I took Jeskai Artifacts to Mythic, no problem, right? And I want to emphasize this over and over again. If it is a known archetype, right? If it is a net deck that we talk about at all at some point in the series, you can take it to Mythic. You can take a very wide variety of decks to Mythic, right? So this is just to help people out who are new to Magic the Gathering kind of understand what the popular decks are on the ladder, and what cards are good in their opening hand so that you can counter their strategy, right? Like when you know like, oh, that's key to them having kind of their ideal start kind of thing, right? Anyway, so I digress. Number 6 is Dimir Midrange, at number 6 in tier 2 with 1,400 matches. If we compare it to week 4, we see no changes to the list. So this is the most top performing but most popular list. Yeah, with 1,400 matches. This list specifically, it is favored against Mono Green Landfall, and that's why Dimir Midrange was at the top of the list. Was that the most popular deck on the ladder was Mono Green Landfall? We're starting to see a shift in the new season where that's not the case. It's favored. It's a favored coin flip against Boros Burn, which makes it a nice counter to everybody playing Boros Burn to counter the Jeskai Artifacts, and it is a coin flip against mono white life gain and mono red aggro and Izzet Prowess. So it can feel a little bit like you're just stuck in 50-50 land with this deck. And then it is weak against Jeskai Artifacts. So if you're bumping in against lots of Jeskai Artifacts, Dimir Midrange is a bad choice. And that might be why we're seeing more people come back. So like what we saw last season was a bunch of people played Jeskai Artifacts, got into Mythic, and then stopped playing. And so now with the new season, you have a bunch of people who are like, well, let's go hit Mythic again. Let's play Jeskai Artifacts. And so then Dimir Midrange drops as that deck is more popular. Right? So the opening hand you're looking for, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of options here because a lot of these are like little 1-ofs and 2-ofs. Cecil Dark Knight is really good to have in your opening hand. Spyglass Siren is a really good one so that you can set up a Kaido on turn 3. You've got the Phantom Interference is nice for early disruption. The rest of it is all just early disruption. So Phantom Interference, Nowhere to Run, Bitter Triumph, the Flood Pits Drowner, the Deep Cavern Bat, and Shoot the Sheriff. Number 7 in Tier 2 is Azorius Control with 1,100 matches. If we compare it to Week 4, we can see that it kind of reverted back to the one that's better against Jeskai Artifacts, which reflects the increase in Jeskai Artifacts and the dip in Dimir Midrange going down. So it's dropped a Day of Judgment, a Stock Up, an Island, a Seam Rip, a Negate, a Beza, Overlord of the Mistmoors, Quantum Riddler, and 2 Kutzel's Flankers. The reasons why we saw the Kutzel's Flankers last week was because of a spike in Esper Mill, or Dimir Mill, which we're not seeing as much of at the beginning of this season. So it's not performing as well. For those cards that we pulled out, though, we've got an additional Hardlock Whale, Meticulous Archive, which is the Azorius Surveil land, the 4th copy of the No More Lies. I prefer 4. We talked about that last week. It's one of my favorite cards to look for in the opening hand. 4th copy of 3 Steps Ahead, 2 Split Ups, 2 Authority of the Consuls, Meringue River Regent as a win condition, and a 4th copy of the Consultative Star Charts. So this archetype is favored against mono white life gain, and might be why we're seeing a little bit more of Azorius Control, is because we're starting to see the mono white life gain a little bit more in Diamond and above. And then it's also favored against Jeskai Artifacts, which I already mentioned is also you're seeing more of. Coin Flip, Mono Red Aggro, Mono Black Demons, and it's weak against Boros Burn. So, the opening hand, you're looking for like your Hornlock Whale is early interaction as well as a win condition. No More Lies is one of my favorite ones to have in your opening hand for disrupting your opponent's early plays. Authority of the Consuls is nice to have if you are running it to slow your opponent down. Seam Rip as well counts as early interaction. And then Day of Judgment is a pretty good one to look for. Just having your turn 4 Wrath is a handy one to have in your opening hand. All right, and number 8 in Tier 3 is Orzhov Sephiroth. Now, I'm going to drill this point home. If it's in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, if we're talking about it, you can take the deck to Mythic. So this one was 1,600 matches. If we compare it to Week 4, we see no changes to the archetype. This deck is designed to... It struggles a little bit. Honestly, it depends on kind of like how the deck surveils and how the Raise the Past hits, right? So it's a favored coin flip against Boros Burn, Mono Red Aggro, and Mono Black Demons. Mono Black Demons because you resurrect the stuff that's being destroyed. Boros Burn and Mono Red Aggro because you have the life gain kind of thing going on. You're weak against Jeskai Artifacts, Mono White Life Gain, and Mono Green Landfall, which I think are all 3 very popular picks, which is why we don't usually see this in the top 8. Its opening hand, though, you're looking for the Voice of Victory, the Snarling Gorehound to help fill that graveyard, Sir Vondum Sunstar Exemplar, since even if they remove this, it still removes something of theirs, often being a 2-for-1, as long as you can trigger it up to power 4. And then Sephiroth Fabled Soldier is kind of what the whole deck, why it's called Orzhov Sephiroth, right? So, of course, this one's a good one to have in your opening hand. Okay, and now for the tournaments in best of 3. So we had Mono Red Aggro by Brennan Roy, who took down first place in the SCG Con in Orlando on August 30th, Saturday. So it went 16-2, and if we compare this one, we have to go back to week 1 of Edge of Eternities, and we can see that they took it in a very different direction. So they dropped 1 copy of the Lightning Strike, they dropped 2 copies of the Witchstalker Frenzy, they dropped 2 Inties from the list, they dropped all 4 Manifold Mouse, dropped 2 Kellens that were being explored, as well as 3 Grease Wrench Goblins, 2 Tersa Light Shatters, and instead are bringing in the Abrade to counter like Izzet Cauldron, 3 Scorching Shots. This one could be like the Dragon, right? The Scorching Broodmaw or whatever. It's good. This one can hit flyers though, so there's the upside to that, right? Rockface Village is bringing in a 4th copy here. Even though we're kind of taking out the Manifold Mouse, you still have like Hired Claw and Emberheart Challenger that are nice targets for it. And then we have the Razorkin, where is it? Razorkin Needlehead, which I was talking about in best of 1. This is the punishment for Izzet Cauldron drawing a bunch of cards, right? So like if they're going to be using the Winter Night Stories to draw a bunch, at least you're pinging them with the Razorkin Needlehead. And we also have the Burnout Bastronaut, which has the max speed and can be quite a powerful threat. And then we have the 3 copies of the Nova Hellkite, which can be particularly nice for sniping little 1/1 flyers like Deep Cavern Bat and Spyglass Siren out of the air in Dimir Midrange. So kind of refreshing to see that the tournament was taken down by Mono Red instead of Izzet Cauldron, because Izzet Cauldron was definitely the most popular pick in the tournament. And yeah, kind of cool to see Mono Red going in a different direction. And we're actually going to talk about Mono Red as well as Izzet Cauldron going in a different direction this week. Lots of cool stuff happening in best of 3, in my opinion. So the best of 3 sideboard also got a tweak. We're dropping 1 Nova Hellkite. We're dropping 2 Pyroclasms, which is the Wrath, Sweeper, cheap Sweeper. Case of the Crimson Pulse, which gives you some dig in the late game. Draconautics Engineer, which gives you the kind of haste but at a cost. And then we have dropped the 3 copies of Suplex, which is an artifact hate. And instead we're bringing in a copy of Abrade to hate on Izzet Cauldron, give you artifact hate. Obliterating Bolt, we're bringing in a 3rd copy here. I really like this one when you're up against Dimir Midrange because of the the Enduring Curiosity, being able to exile it and just get it out of here, right? Sometimes we see the Scorching Dragonfire can be included as well because it's instant speed instead of sorcery. But then the downside is that you can't hit the 2/4 Death Toucher that I can never remember the name of for whatever reason. My brain does not like the name of that card. Obliterating Bolt can at least hit that 4 toughness. Sunspine Lynx is good against the Izzet Cauldron deck, runs a fair amount of non-basics as well as Dimir Midrange. Any 4-color more strategy, obviously, you can bring in the Sunspine Lynx. So just look for strategies that are not running a lot of basics. Vengeful Possession is to punish the go tall nature of the Izzet Cauldron deck, being able to be just like, okay, well, you popped off and did your crazy big turn. I'm then going to take your giant marauding Mako or whatever and hit you with it. And then Fire Magic instead of Pyroclasm, you can tweak it a little bit better, right? Like, so you can do this as a turn 1 if you're up against a bunch of X1s like Spyglass Siren and Deep Cavern Bat. Whereas like you have to pay 3 to do the 2 damage to the board, what Pyroclasm would do. So but it gives you that versatility to be able to kind of tweak it to the board state. All right, and then 2nd place was taken down by Izzet Cauldron by Jack Potter. And if we compare to week 4, we can see that they dropped a Soulstone Sanctuary, 2 Tersa Light Shatters, a Spell Pierce, and an Obliterating Bolt to bring in a Null, which is just because there's a lot of Izzet Cauldron just main boarding it. Sometimes we see that. Steam Caller, 3 copies. Debate is whether or not you run 2, 3, or 4. Steam Core Scholars, that's really where I see a lot of the variation in Izzet Cauldron. Running 2 Starting Towns. More people have been like bringing in the Starting Town, and I think it's good. And then we've got the 3rd copy of the Quantum Riddler, and this one really helps out against the mirror match as well, because they don't really have a way to get rid of it other than bouncing it and giving you additional value, because it's outside of the range of Scorching Shot and Abrade. And yeah, So the best of 3 sideboard also got a little bit of a tweak. We dropped a Disdainful Stroke, which is good against like Overlord of the Mistmoors. Usually what I think of when I see Disdainful Stroke. Annul for some graveyard hate, dropped one of those. Broadside Barrage got dropped, which is kind of the Scorching Shot alternative for Izzet. And then we also see that they dropped a single copy of the Abrade to bring in a Essence Scatter, which is straight up counter a creature spell, 2 Obliterating Bolts, which I talked about already, into the Floodmaw as the 4th copy in the sideboard, and then Bounce Off. So we can actually have 5 things of bounce, I think largely if we're coming up against other Quantum Riddlers in the mirror match. Okay, so now back to the less exciting standard challenges that I love to follow in Magic the Gathering Online. Still think they're excellent tournaments. So we'll talk about Saturday's tournaments first, and then end with Sundays. So Izzet Cauldron by Jaco Pablo took down first place in one of the Saturday tournaments, went 8-1. And if we compare this one to the list that we just talked about, we can see that they dropped, they went in such a substantial different way that this is almost like a new archetype, right? So they dropped an Agatha's Soul Cauldron, a Thundering Falls, Prophesydectic Memory, Into the Floodmaw, 2 Mountains, a Marauding Mako, Winter Night Stories, 2 Abrades, an Annul, a Soulstone Sanctuary, a Wild Ride, all 4 Fear of Missing Outs, 3 Steam Core Scholars, and instead kind of blended more into the Izzet prowess that we've seen. So we've got 4 copies of Opt, 4 copies of Torch the Tower, 4 copies of the Artist's Talent, which whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. So instead of using the Steam Cores and the Fear of Missing Outs, you're using this to accomplish that. And then non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, which on top of the free mana that you're getting from Vivi, you just get yeah, you can just chain a whole bunch of spells, right? Then we're running 2 islands, a Kori Mountain Monastery, which was from Tarkir, just to give us a little bit of late game dig off of our lands, and then the 4th copy of the Quantum Riddler, just to lean fully into hating on Izzet Cauldron. So this one, I think we'll see. I think it's going to replace the current version of Izzet Cauldron. I don't know. We'll see. But the best of 3 sideboard, Obliterating Bolt got dropped, the Essence Scatter got dropped, Disdainful Stroke, Bounce Off, Meringue River Regent, Quantum Riddler, and the 3 Torch the Towers, because the Torch the Towers being run in the main. Instead, we're running a Negate in the sideboard for against Control, 2 Abrades for the Artifact Hate, as well as an additional copy of Annul. Spell Pierce for cheaper Wraths, and I really like these when you're playing up against something like the Depopulate, like the 4 costed Wraths. Protect your board with the Spell Pierces early on. Ral's also pretty good for that, so if you're seeing more sweepers, Ral tends to sneak its way back into the sideboard, and so we're seeing that here. And then we have Into the Floodmaw for that little bit of bounce that we can bring in, and then the Broadside Barrage for the X5 Hate. So second place in the standard challenge on Saturday was taken down by Mono Red Aggro by Baraldi, went 8-1. And if we compare this one to the week 1 list that I covered, 4 weeks ago, so almost a month ago, this is more of the version that we were seeing of Mono Red. So it's -1 Lightning Strike, -2 Mountains to bring in the 2 additional copies of the Witchstalker Frenzy, so running the full playset, and then the 4th copy of the Rockface Village. Otherwise, it's leaning into the mouse synergies that we saw in week 1 off the Manifold Mouse. The best of 3 sideboard also saw a pretty good rework. So we dropped a Pyroclasm, the 2 Chandra Spark Hunters, which are in there like Ral is for against sweepers. Draconautics Engineer, also for against sweepers to give you that instant haste. Nova Hellkite, and the 3 Suplex, which is Artifact Hate. So we're bringing in a Lightning Strike to give us a little bit of direct damage, I think. Obliterating Bolt, running an additional copy there. 3 Torch the Towers. You're going to bring this in against other aggro matchups that you're going to disrupt when you're on the draw. We're also running a Scorching Shot and the Sunspine, 2 Sunspine Links we already talked about. And then this one also bringing in Ghost Vacuum, which is kind of another way that you can hate on Izzet Cauldron, is that you remove Vivi from the graveyard. Okay, now for the second Saturday tournament, which was taken down by Dimir Midrange by O. Daniel Akos. Familiar name if you've ever been following the best of 3 tournament scene on standard on Magic the Gathering Online. So 9-0. If we compare this one to week 4, we can see that they dropped 2 Preacher of the Schisms. This usually does better against aggro, worse against the more controlling matchups. Kaido being dropped down is the opposite of that. Usually we see the 4th copy of Kaido come in when we're up against less aggro. Then we've got 1 less Soulstone Sanctuary, 1 less Tragic Trajectory, 2 less Islands, 1 less Swamp, and 1 less Strategic Betrayal. And Strategic Betrayal is the one that you sacrifice something and then exile the graveyard. So instead, we're bringing in the Graveyard Hate via Lord Skitter. We're bringing in a Long Goodbye, which helps us if they have some form of ward or counter spells like Spell Pierce, right? So that we can ice Vivi, basically. And then we've got Fountain Port, Fabloom Trick. I've talked about this one before. This one's really nice in the mirror match against other Dimir Midrange. So just like a one of there. 1 stab for a little bit of early interaction, and then an additional Cecil Dark Knight than what we saw being played in last week, and then the 3 starting towns. So more people playing the starting towns. I think that it's a relatively safe craft. As far like it's kind of the best fixing that we've got right now. Just a versatile pain land, and I kind of like that they just made it like instead of doing those like pairs of pain lands, they're just like, okay, here's a rainbow pain land. Let's go. So the best of 3 sideboard dropped in a Null, 2 Spell Pierce, Lord Skitter, 3 Steps Ahead, Vren the Relentless, and an Elegy Acolyte, and instead is bringing in the Negate for against control, Tishana's Tidebinder, which can hit artifacts, so it's good against Izzet Cauldron, the 4th copy of Kaido if we aren't up against the aggro matchups, and then we're also bringing in 1 stab in the sideboard. So if we are against an aggro matchup, we can bring in the stab. Same with the Karsi Revenant, give us some lifelink. And then we do have the Strategic Betrayals. We have an additional copy has been moved from the main to the sideboard if we need some more Graveyard Hate than just Lord Skitter. And we also have, sorry, one last thing is the Tragic Trajectory has been added as well for some early interaction, like stab, that can go a little bit harder with the -10/-10. All right, on to second place on Saturday for the second tournament was Mono Red Aggro by #1 Noob, went 6-3. And if we compare this one to Brennan Roy, who took down the Orlando tournament, we can see that it was closer to that version than it was the Manifold Mouse version, but there's also still enough changes that all 3 are distinct versions. So we've got 2 less Lightning Strikes, 2 less Mountains, 1 less Abrade, 3 less Scorching Shots, dropping the Rockface Villages entirely, as well as the 4 Emberheart Challengers to bring in Obliterating Bolt in the main, the 4 copies of the Scalding Viper. Which is why we see the blue kind of sneaking in here to be able to do the sorcery adventure side of the Scalding Viper. We've got the Witchstalker Frenzy, bringing in 2 copies there. And that one's really... The more we see the Witchstalker Frenzy, to me, denotes that there's less interaction being run or less interaction being anticipated, because like where the Witchstalker Frenzy really shines, in my opinion, is shooting your own Screaming Nemesis, which then gets 2 for 1 if they have interaction or bounced or something like that, right? So Spireglass, and then bringing in the blue with the Spirebluff Canal and the 4 River Pyre Verges. Which I like the Verge lands, you know, like they're mountains that can become islands. So it's like the splash feels really free. The best of 3 sideboard also has 1 less Chandra Spark Hunter, 1 less Fire Magic, and 3 less Obliterating Bolts. And instead is bringing in an additional copy of Abrade for Artifact Hate. Magebane Lizard, we saw this one as a classic counter to Izzet Cauldron prior to rotation and the ban of Corey Steelcutter. Anytime that your opponent is playing multiple spells, which Izzet Cauldron still does, Magebane Lizard is a pretty good counter to that. We also have Ruinous Rampage. Exile all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. That's a pretty good way to get rid of the cauldrons, and you can also just have it be burn if that is what you need to win the game. And then 1 copy of the Cut Propulsion. Target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. If that creature has flying, it deals twice that much damage to itself instead. It's a nice way to get rid of those Quantum Riddlers. Simic... Oh, sorry. The third and final Izzet Cauldron deck will be by Tentacle Fan. Took down Sunday's tournament, got first place with a 7-2. And if we compare this one to Jaco Pablo, we can see that they dropped a Torch the Tower, a Quarry Mountain Monastery, and brought in Into the Flood Maw and a Soulstone Sanctuary. So very similar lists, and that's why I think in both standard challenges, this is the list that we're starting to see winning those standard challenges. We'll see if that is reflected in later tournaments down the road. So the best of 3 sideboard, also a very small tweak. We have 1 less Ral Crackling Wit and 1 less Into the Flood Maw, which was moved to the main. And instead we have a Torch the Tower in the sideboard, the 4th copy for against other aggro matchups. And then I think because we're seeing a little bit more mono red, they're bringing back the Unable to Scream, which is a nice answer to the Screaming Nemesis. As well as other, I mean, like, there are more targets than that. It's just the number one threat that I think of answering with Unable to Scream. Okay, and the last tournament is second place on Sunday was Simic Midrange by Raydan. Went 7-2. And I think this is a really good composition of what the meta feels like to me right now, right? Like, if we look at like MTG Goldfish and whatnot, if we look at the meta spread, it's primarily Izzet Cauldron, mono red aggro, with hints of Dimir Midrange and Simic Midrange. Like, I think that's pretty accurate, right? So anyway, this one, if we compare it to week 1, which was the last time that I talked about Simic Midrange, we can see that there have been some changes. So we dropped a Restless Vinestalk, we dropped a Bushwhack, we dropped the 3 Subterranean Schooners, we dropped the 3 Sentinel of the Nameless Cities, which is the 3/4 Vigilance that creates map tokens, and we dropped the 2 Bristly Bills, which is what we see in Mono Green Landfall or Gruul Landfall. And instead we're running Royal Treatment to protect our dudes, Repulsive Mutation in the main, usually we see this in the sideboard, 2 Scrap Shooters coming into the main as well as a way to give us artifact hate. And then we have the Azure Beastbinder. We've seen this explored in like Rat lists and Dimir Midrange. It can be nice for shutting things down because it can silence artifacts. So it's nice against Izzet Cauldron. Surak then punishes the single point interaction of our opponents. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, you draw a card. And then we've got the Ouroboros, which 4th copy here, and then the 1 Forest. So Ouroboros, you know, if they don't have an answer for this, it runs away with the game, and if you're able to protect it, it can be a nice reason to try to protect it. So the best of 3 sideboard also dropped the 2 Repulsive Mutations from the sideboard. So we have 1 in the main, 1 in the sideboard, the other 2 got dropped. We have 3 less Scavenging Ooze. We have 2 less Suraks have been moved from the sideboard to the main. We have an Annul for artifact hate, Tishana's Tidebinder for artifact hate, 3 Keen-Eyed Curator to give us the graveyard hate, and then the 2 Sob Sunan, Luxa Embodied to give us the basically mono red. Like, because of the indestructible, mono red really struggles against this 6/6. So this one is like, okay, we're coming up against a lot of the the new mono red decks. Sob Sunan I think is a pretty good one too. Right? So hope that answers all of your questions that you could ever have about what's happening in best of 1 and best of 3 standard. I think, again, I feel the reason why I do it the way that I do it is because I like it. I hope you like it as well. And if you do look forward to this video every week, do consider becoming a YouTube member. It does help support me. It's as cheap as $2 a month or as expensive as $25 a month if you want to. But it helps keep my spirits going, helps me, help support the channel. So thank you to those who do it. Thank you to my YouTube members. And then also, you get perks. You get stuff like community deck techs, priority there, and my undying love and all that. So have a wonderful week, everybody. I will see you all on Sunday for my specific brews for Edge of Eternities, focusing largely on budget builds. We'll see how it goes. Still a work in progress. I'm going to try to finish it by Sunday. So with that, I will see you then. Take care.